of the courthouse alive and presenting that and sharing that with people, that the Santa Barbara Historical Museum and the Montecito Association History Committee do the same thing, but in a different way for all of Santa Barbara. Anyways, I'm going to go ahead and get started. I know that I remember a couple of years ago, I did present a PowerPoint presentation on my book, The Way It Was, Santa Barbara Comes of Age. I'm happy to say I'm down to my last 90 books. So that's very exciting after 1,250. So I'm ready for it to be gone. and hopefully this season will do that for me. But anyway, so I just wanted to give you that as a start, and here we go. Okay, in the 1870s, Santa Barbara was still a Wild West town. It had dirt streets, wooden sidewalks, brick buildings, which were actually they considered to be an improvement over the old adobe buildings that were lining State Street, and false fronts. Now you can see that we still have no cars at this time, but you can see the tram tracks that are in the middle of the street, and we had mule-drawn trams, which was a great improvement in transportation as well. At this time, in the 1870s, the population of Santa Barbara was about 3,000 people. And there were only 2 restaurants in town, at least only 2 that advertised in the newspapers. There were, however, 16 saloons, 3 liquor dealers, and 2 breweries. So you know where we went in order to get our sustenance back then. The American restaurant, which would actually stay in business until the 1920s, which is a really long run for a restaurant in this town, as you well know, if you've been here a while, they seem to change every year. But anyways, they offered really good prices, 12.5 cents for a meal, and that included bread and butter and vegetables that were thrown in for free. And however, if you wanted a porterhouse steak, it was a whopping 25 cents. Later on, when the oyster mania hit Santa Barbara, they would start selling oysters as well. If you were an aging frontiersman, though, one of those pioneers that came and settled the place or discovered the place, you couldn't come to Santa Barbara to get your nostalgic frontier meal. You had to go all the way back to Chicago. And at the Grand Pacific Hotel, you could go and order the kinds of things you would have been eating in the wilderness, however, a little bit upgraded. For instance, if you went there, you could get a wild boar steak, ragout de raccoon, squirrel pie, and aged bear paws in burgundy sauce. Unfortunately, the bear paws were usually so well aged, they were actually putrefied. And it's no wonder that the hog butcher of the world was the cause of the Pure Food and Drug Act. As the number of eating establishments grew in Santa Barbara, one resident expressed his concern about the downfall of the institution of marriage, which he blamed on the restaurants, clubs, and hotels, which had become a home for so many thousands of people. He believed that not only that mechanization and education had changed women. And he said, and published in the paper, obedience has fallen from her vocabulary. This was a terrible thing indeed. And by 1897, they foresaw that this would be the new woman, and the men would be doing all of the laundry and the housework. Also during the 1870s, Judge Alfred Packard declared that all of our political troubles in the nation were caused by the decay of housewifery. At a political rally, he said that when the women returned to the kitchen and made mince pies and pumpkin pies with their own fair hands, instead of leaving this grand work to the Chinese cook, then everything would be all right with the nation. Men would not have indigestion anymore, and they would return to the virtues of the original government. Well, I don't know if Ben Franklin would have agreed with that, but there you go. Now, Packard believed that when Ma was in the kitchen, all is right with the world. In fact, a lot of us these days, thank you COVID-19, have had to return to the kitchen and put on our apron so that we can actually get food on the table for ourselves and our husbands. In fact, one source said that they really thought that by the time this is all over, half of us are going to end up as gourmet cooks, while the other half will have drinking problems. My husband, of course, does not think that my kitchen duties have been made me a better cook, so you can guess what side of that I'm going to be on. Okay, so I have, oh, by the way, I have been practicing social distancing, but it's from the refrigerator. In retaliation for Judge Packard's comments, a woman wrote into the morning press and said that she was the happiest woman in Santa Barbara. And the reason for that was that the local restaurant would send her her food already prepared, and all she needed to do was pop it into the oven. She said this was more expensive than cooking it from scratch, but it saved her 3 hours of absolute drudgery, which would make her, and this is why it was okay to spend this extra money, a much better companion for her husband. She could linger at the table with him and not return to those dirty pots and pans, and she instead would sing him songs, and it would be wedded bliss. And she encouraged other people to do the same, and this is what she wrote. The victory, and this is Maria Ann, her neighbor, by the way. The victory is yours, Maria Ann. Fling your pots and kettles out the window. Toss that codfish dangling from your kitchen roof into the sea where it belongs. Give that half peck of potatoes to your neighbor and give one last long vindictive look at that hateful kitchen and say adieu forever. Unfortunately, by 1903, which is the date of this particular picture, Maria Ann was still working on that peck of potatoes. Hotels and boarding houses in town had always provided meals, but it took a long time for restaurants to actually become established. The Central Restaurant, which you see here, was one of the earliest in town, and it offered room and board, as did many of the saloons. If you take a look at this picture, you can see we still have wooden sidewalks, and on the very far right of the photograph, or I guess I could do this with my cursor right here, are two Chinese men. They are cooks for the restaurant. You see the wait staff and other workers right here. A woman with an apron, obviously someone who works at the restaurant. And I don't know who these other people were, but they probably are either clients or perhaps even the owners of the Central Restaurant. What we had at this time like I said, in 1870s, we had only 2 restaurants, but the number slowly grew, and by 1897, with a population of nearly 6,000 people, there were actually 8 restaurants and 13 saloons in town. In 1910, with a population of 12,000, there were 22 restaurants and 21 saloons in town. And in 1920, with a population of 20,000, there were still 22 restaurants in town, but there were no more saloons, at least not legal ones. And that would be a fight that would go on for the next 11 or so years. So in 1920, despite the lack of aperitifs, dining had really come into its own. In fact, no self-respecting woman would be caught dead in a restaurant without some kind of elegant chapeau on her head. This young woman from 1920 is wearing a hat that was especially appropriate and especially built for dining. And I'm sure she liked her steak rare. The morning press of that year actually published an ad for that particular hat. And this is what it said. It said that it was designed for restaurant wear and was made of draped satin and vulture feathers, which spread out on both sides like wings. Just the thing for eating a juicy porterhouse steak. For several decades, however, the Santa Barbarans bemoaned the lack of a really fine restaurant in town. Instead, there was a proliferation of sketchy oyster saloons. This photo shows the Fountain Saloon, which often found itself in the news for barroom fights and disobeying the closing laws, as well as one time when a thirsty horse bellied up to the bar. As the number of oyster saloons proliferated, the moral character of the oyster came into question. A writer to the news press opined that the oyster himself was very quiet and well-behaved, and yet he seemed to participate in every scene of debauchery and revelry in town. His name, the writer said, had become associated with dissoluteness and dissipation. Charles Dickens, in fact, said that when a man fell into poverty because of laziness and drunkenness, he started to eat a steady diet of these oysters. So for the most part, oysters were sort of sketchy, and people believed that it became associated with late hours, unwholesome haunts, and potations of gin. The apparently gin-soaked town of Santa Barbara, however, couldn't get enough of the tasty bivalves. One man became so enamored of the oysters that he wedged himself into a oyster barrel and proceeded to have enough gin to get himself thoroughly drunk. He was arrested for extreme inebriation and fined $5 and released. Now, he was quite miffed because he didn't understand why somebody wouldn't let him have a private drink in his own home. Apparently, that was the oyster barrel. As you can see, the oysters were in lots of the different restaurants in town. The American restaurant had fresh oysters. They advertised they came in by steamer every single week. And was a brand new restaurant in town called the Metropolitan. It was for coffee, oyster, and ice cream saloon, but it also was a representative of a national brewery. So there were lots of things, and like something that I really haven't talked about, but at a lot of the saloons, there would be a free lunch. And the reason for that is they would have this really inexpensive food and it would bring people in to drink a lot. And that's what was happening with the Metropolitan. Few people ate out every single night, and we had a host of food emporiums, and all of them were well aware of the fact that an artful and delightful display would draw people into their stores. This was Deal's grocery store. He was probably the premier grocer in Santa Barbara, although there were many. In his day, he published a brochure that was sent throughout the nation. This store was known nationwide, and this is his display of fruits, well, basically fruits, and you can see it's maybe a little odd for us today, but this is what he did. We have the bananas over here hanging from the eaves, some festooning of colorful branches, and you can see the pumpkins in the front, and all these little baskets of fruit all stacked up very nicely, even pineapples. And so Deal's was very, very important. He sent out salesmen to your house. If they would take your orders directly from your house. When they had a phone, you could call them and get your order. They had 3 deliveries a day out to Montecito and throughout Santa Barbara. So they were a really big deal. And the artful display was very important. Now, not only did the grocery stores have wonderful displays to draw you in, so did the butcher shops. This is the California market. And if you look at the pig carcasses hanging above the workers, you can see that each one is carved in a particular way to create some sort of decorative geometric pattern. You also are seeing right above them, these are branches from the pepper tree. And the pepper tree leaves and pepper tree fruit is actually antiseptic and antibacterial. So it was a really good thing to be hanging in the butcher shops. And you can see the men have not yet gone to work. Their aprons are unstained. Much of the produce in town was grown by Chinese farmers and then either delivered by wagon or, like with this man, he has a yoke with 2 big baskets. And quite frankly, if it was any fresher, it was going to be in the field. And he would deliver to your home. We also had our own mineral water bottling plant. It's called Veronica Springs Medicinal Water. It was, the area is still there today. It's off of Modoc Road. It's west of Modoc Road, sort of across from Ellings Park. You can see one lady there as she's drinking from the fountain. This was called the Fountain House. And behind them, you'll see, I'll try to get my cursor there. It's disappearing. There it is. See it? Behind the ladies, there is a barn-like building, and that was one of the bottling plants that they had, and then they would ship it actually nationwide. If you went to visit and you had sampled some of the water, you better have a fast horse to get you back home before the waters took their effect. As you can see, it's nature's own remedy for constipation. There was only one fish broker in town. His name was Larco. He was an Italian, and he was famous because of this white pelican, which became quite a tourist attraction, really, in Santa Barbara. A lot of photographs of this pelican. He was, the story behind him was that if he was there at Larco's, it meant that there was a storm brewing at sea, and therefore the fishing fleet did not go out and there would be no fish coming in. But if he were gone, it was smooth sailing and the fishing was going to be safe and easy to do. And this woman is actually, her daughter ended up coming to live in Santa Barbara. Her name was Isabel Strong as a married name. Okay. It was customary for the larger hotels to grow or produce their own food that they would then serve in their, use as ingredients for what they served in their elegant dining rooms. The Arlington Hotel, which once stood where the Arlington Theater is right now, actually grew almost all of its vegetables on the lot just west of that block off of Sola. And they also, on the property itself, had a pen where they raised turtles for their mock turtle soup. This one is the Potter Hotel, and it once stood, I'm sure most of you know this, right down by West Beach. In fact, there's a little park there that's just a little grass lawn lined by palm trees that was used to lead to it. Anyways, the Potter Hotel had so many places where they were growing their own food. And they also had this very elegant dining room. They had several dining rooms, but this was the one they were the most proud of. But right behind that hotel, they had a huge plot of land where they were growing artichokes. And I love this photograph because if you look over on the left, you can see the roof of a glass house. And then if you look back here where there's these 2 buildings and it looks like a wall or something, that's Castillo Street. And there used to be a gasworks there. If you were going to go a little bit further, you can't see it, but that would have been Plaza Del Mar. I don't know whose house this would have been. It's not the Fernald house, I promise you. But up on the hill, this is the Dibley Mansion. And Dibley was an old pioneer. He married into one of the old Spanish families. And this right up here on the hill, this is was damaged in the earthquake, and they took it down, and this is now City College. And I don't think the rabbit is there for anything other reason that he's just sneaking into the patch. They also had a squab farm, which they say was the largest in the world. Squabs are pigeons, but nobody wants to put pigeons on their menu, so they call them squabs. They also had their own, they raised their own pigs, and that was probably out in Goleta somewhere. And I'm sorry, I've got myself lost. Okay, there we go. And I'm going to talk now about something that became so popular in Santa Barbara restaurants that it became an institution. And that basically was a chicken dinner, Sunday chicken dinners. And I'm still researching where this came from, but we didn't really start seeing it in the restaurants until the 1880s. I'm gonna pass this on by. This was another hotel that was just opened, and you can see lots of also something else about the dinners, and look at what people would eat for breakfast. The beef steak, the lamb chop, pork chop, fried liver per plate. I don't think most of us would eat any of those things for breakfast, but it was 10 cents. But you could also have a sirloin or a porterhouse for 20. Yes, they had omelets, and they had milk and dry toast and hot cakes, but these other things are kind of gone from the menu. And of course, they were going to have fried chicken. Dinner, which was normally served at this time, if they advertised it this way, in the afternoon, had a riff on what was here. Now it could be boiled or baked, fresh or salt fish, and corned beef and roast pork, lamb or veal, etc. And again, for supper, which was a lighter meal, again, the same meats are going to be brought out, but now they're cold, and oysters, always oysters, and muffins and waffles for supper as well. So it was sort of a different way that people ate during this time. And the chicken dinner, which had become the Sunday standard, was being advertised all throughout Santa Barbara at all the restaurants. In 1889, for instance, the Vienna restaurant, chicken dinner every Sunday. In 1898, fine chicken dinner at Thayer's, usual price 25 cents. 1905, the Alhambra and the Claremont were in competition. They had a chicken dinner that included soup, salad, chicken, vegetables, ice cream, pie, or pudding, coffee, tea, milk, or cocoa, and coffee to top it off. And that was a pretty good price, right? And then as late as 1912, the Floral Inn had a chicken dinner, but they raised the price to 50 cents because they were offering music along with dinner. Chicken dinners had become the main fundraiser for almost all the churches in Santa Barbara, the Congregationalists, the Presbyterians, the Episcopals. And St. Paul's Methodist Episcopal Church, which, by the way, is the newest Santa Barbara city landmark, or maybe not quite the newest. I just read today that Casa de la Raza has become a city landmark, so this is almost the newest one. The members of this church in 1907 were trying to raise money to build the church that you see behind them, which is St. Paul's African Methodist Episcopal Church. And one of the ways they did that was by holding Southern dinners and chicken dinners to raise money. This one was sort of interesting because it brings up also another thing, that if you wanted to have really fine dining, it better be French, because that was the only thing that was fine dining. That was the standard. And so Mrs. Du Bois of the AME was chairman of the committee for that particular Southern dinner, and she decided to use some of the terminology that is usually given for French dining. And so here's their bill of fare, and I love it. And I don't know if she was doing this tongue in cheek or not, but she was the cook for the Sawyer family who owned the Hot Springs Hotel. And they were giving Delmonico luncheons, which I'll come back to in a minute, and you'll understand why there may have been an influence. Anyways, if you come down here, the bill of fare: chicken gumbo soup a la New Orleans, salad, potato a la Mississippi, New England dinner a la Boston, old-fashioned chicken pie a la Alabama, spare ribs of pork, sweet potatoes, cornbread a la Georgia, hot biscuits, dessert, lemon pie, and then, of course, cream a la Texas. So we definitely were upgrading the menu in this way. So back to Delmonico's. Delmonico's of New York was founded in 1827, and it became the absolute standard for excellence and style in dining. And all throughout the United States, Delmonico restaurants would open, but they weren't owned by the people who owned Delmonico's restaurant in New York. People just called their restaurant that to indicate that it was this high-class restaurant. Their chef, Charles, I believe, Ranoffer, wrote a book called The Epicurean, I believe in 1895. He'd been the chef there for 30 years, and he had thousands of recipes and menus in there. And one of them, just to give you an idea of how strange some of these recipes were, I'm just going to read a piece of this. This was recipe number 2,599, terrine of larks, or terrine de mauviettes, bone 2 or 3 dozen larks. That's something I'm going to do. Season, cook a part of the intestines with fat pork and then pass them through a sieve. Prepare 1.5 pounds of chopped galantine forcemeat. I have no idea what forcemeat is, but I could go to recipe 66 and find out. Place it in a vessel, and I don't think they mean a boat, and mix it with a few spoonfuls of cooked fine herbs. Again, you can get that recipe on number 385. Chopped truffles and intestine pulp. Then you are to spread the larks on the table and lay each one in a forcemeat ball, and line a terrine used for cooking, and proceed to fill it exactly as described as this other recipe, and then bake for 1.25 hours, and then press it down, and then put jelly on it. Sounds horrid, but I'm sure it was an extreme delicacy back in those days. So what happened in 1909? We got a Delmonico restaurant in Santa Barbara. It was called, obviously, Delmonico, and it was established by a first-class French cook. The first class, let me go, you find my place. I'm talking without my notes here. Okay. The French cook's name was Lucien Abadie. And it's an interesting last name because Abadie was a name of 2 brothers who actually had come here probably in the 1840s or 1850s. In fact, Alexander Harmer's wife was an Abadie. Yeah, and so, but this man came directly from France. He had won first prize at the first prize. Okay, he had won first prize in the Paris as a chef supreme at a Paris exposition. Came here in 1919, opened this restaurant on State Street, and he offered regular French lunch and dinner. Well, if regular French is that lark terrine, I don't know what Santa Barbara Palace would have done with that. And he had private rooms for parties and families. He had high aspirations for his restaurant, and he advertised a menu that would make a gourmet salivate. But this poor, hapless French chef ran afoul almost immediately. Since Santa Barbara on Sunday was positively clucking and he had to provide a chicken dinner for everyone, he was busy preparing for that Sunday when a man named Jin Buck, who had been working at the restaurant for several weeks, approached him and said that he had a dozen chickens for sale. They were plump and they looked really good. And he decided that, yeah, well, sure, with this Sunday coming up and I can have these chickens at this really great price. And he went ahead and he bought them. And because he was going to make not only a Sunday fricassee of chicken, he was going to make ailé de poulet Montebello, of course, because he had to put that French flair onto it. Anyways, he paid the reasonable asking price, and then he started looking at those chickens and he said, they look familiar. And he looked again and he said, I better go home and count my chickens. And sure enough, he went home and he counted the chickens that he had in his yard and found that 12 were missing. Meanwhile, Jin Buck had flown the coop by going on the 6:35 train to San Luis Obispo. And he, despite alerts to the authorities there, he was eluded the police until December, when he was drawn to Guadalupe by a Fan-Tan game. He lost big at the Fan-Tan game and complained to an officer of the law who was there, Officer Machado, who sympathized with him. And he said, well, I'm really sorry you lost all this money, but I'm thinking of chickens. And sure enough, Jin Buck was arrested, sent back to Santa Barbara, fined $25 on the charge of petty larceny, and then released. Undeterred by the adventure with the larcenist Jin Buck, Lucien worked hard to create a first-class French restaurant. And at this time, he eventually wanted to give a Christmas subscription dinner where people would pay, I can't believe, $2 for the menu. And he had an English menu and a French menu. And anyone who actually reads both French and English will know that the turkey stuffed with chestnuts is the same as the dinde farcio marron in cranberry sauce. So it's kind of funny that he just needed to give that a French taste to it. In 1911, Lucien, like the chef from the real Delmonico's in New York, published a book, and he called it Culinary Progress, The Delight of the Gourmets. The cost of that book was $50, and if you wanted instruction on how to make every single one of these recipes, then you would have to pay $100. Now, to give you an idea of how gourmet this price really was, you should know that in $20 $50 would be $1,370.46. So this was quite an expensive book, and it was not a bestseller. In fact, he really was having a hard time inculcating Santa Barbara with a taste for fine cuisine. He had one more trick up his sleeve. He invented le cuisine roulante, and he actually got a patent on this. It was a portable serving table, and it took the weight out of French dining. He would roll it to the table. There were steam tables, there were cold tables, there were compartments for all of the foods. People could make their selections from the cuisine roulante and then go on their way. This also could not have been very successful because ultimately he went out of business by 1918, and he and his wife opened a hotel instead. And I'm sure the dining room of the hotel had really good food, but no longer was he trying to convince people in Santa Barbara that this was a way to improve their eating habits, so to speak. Well, we have come to the end of our culinary journey, and I will just end with this little photograph here that comes from the California market. As you can see, the display here, they thought they were so clever. It's a suckling pig with sausages around its neck as a little muffler, and it's driving 2 pork tenderloins. And the California market thought this was just a great thing. Anyways, that's all, folks, and I will stick around for some questions or whatever you want to do. Okay, I'm turning it back over to you, Aparna.
Thank you, Hattie. That was so entertaining and fun. Do you want to stop sharing your screen maybe?
Yes, I'll do that. Stop share.
So you can see people if they raise their hand.
There we are. Okay.
Okay. Yeah, you're all welcome to unmute yourself and ask her questions or make comments.
I would like to make a comment immediately and say
Okay.
how grateful I am for such a wonderful story about these foodies. I was wondering what I was going to be getting myself into, and
Yeah.
I'm delighted that I got myself into it.
Yes.
So
yes.
thank you.
Oh, thank you, Rodney. I appreciate that.
I agree. I agree. Being a current foodie myself, it was very, very interesting. Yeah.
So you are a current foodie?
Oh yeah. I mean, we have. I mean, that's why I'm away what I do. Well, that's one reason. But Deb cooks wonderful things every night, and then I pair wines with them. I mean, no, she'll say, "Okay, it's time to get the wine," and I say, "Well, what is it?" And she'll say, "Well, it's salmon." Okay, well, salmon is pretty easy to pair with. That's over here. And she said, "But you might want to try this little pesto sauce that I have on top." Well, that would have blown away my wine choice. So I moved from a white to a red. So we do wine and food pairing every night at home. Now we don't go out much anymore because we're concerned about the pandemic. But we
Your wife,
consider foodies.
your wife is going to turn into the gourmet chef after COVID-19, or was she already one?
She has a private chef certificate from the City College, and yeah.
That's great. That's great. Any other questions? I'm happy to stick around and answer them. I know that the Santa Barbara Historical Museum, I'll be talking there on December 2nd. I encourage you all to, tune in on that. But it's basically about the book again, because they want me to talk about the book so I can sell my 90 copies. But I'm really I'm really going to focus on the Herder family, Albert and Adele Herder, and their contributions artistically to Santa Barbara. Albert Herder's painting hangs in our two paintings, the history of writing, Egyptian hieroglyphics, and the other one is the Gutenberg Bible. Those are his murals in the Santa Barbara Public Library, and he's done, just the influence they had on the Community Arts Association and our Christmas traditions and so many different things. Very interesting life, very interesting things that they did. Really enriched our community. So that's a focus on it, although I'll have to talk about me a little bit too.
Hattie, how do they get to that?
How
they tune into that? Is it Friday night with the Historical Society?
No, it's not. It's December 2nd or 3rd, I think. It's being publicized right now. All you have to do is go to the Santa Barbara Historical Museum website, and then you go to, I guess it's events or something, and it's listed. Just click a link and you can get on with that. So that, and there are a lot of other things to offer through the Historical Museum as well. Lots of different other speakers. They have a whole speakers program.
You do need to register in advance, and then they send you a link.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Yes.
Is it part of the History Happy Hour on Wednesdays? Is that what it is, Hattie?
Yes, yes. It's their History Happy Hour. Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
Hattie, thanks so much for coming in and entertaining us. My gosh.
Yes.
That was really fun. And you are so funny. I kind of fascinated. Even though I don't eat all that, I'm still fascinated by all the stuff you talked about.
Oh my gosh.
I have to say, people.
I'm not sure we're not even going to talk about things. Some of those things we're talking about.
That last minute, sure to send you to plant-based foods, as far as I'm.
Absolutely.
But I'm sure all of you would not eat all the things they described either, right? That
Right,
would
right.
be great.
Disgusting. But it's also just shows you how it's changed, you know.
Yeah. Yeah, it
Yeah.
does. You're right. Yeah.
And the kind of meat they ate, there was so much variety. Now it's like you have what? Beef, pork, chicken, and fish.
So much wild game.
Yeah.
Do you know where I can find a dozen larks and maybe Joe's or something?
Yeah.
I think
Right.
squid is as exotic as you get now, right? You eat squid. Not squid. What's the little birds that you guys eat? Sorry, squid is not the right one. What's that? The
There's
little,
a lot of crows in our yard. Does that help?
Squabs. You're talking about squabs.
yeah, squabs. Yes, you're right. Why did I say squid? I'm like, you don't want squid. It's the ink and all the crazy stuff with that. So
Thank you,
You can eat
Hattie.
squid.
Thank you, Aparna. You have done such a fabulous
thank you.
job of bringing us.
Saparna. Good.
thank you. Thanks, Hattie.
Education and fun.
Thank you.
See you, everybody.
Right. Nice.
Bye-bye.
Have a good night. Enjoy your dinner.
Have a great night, everybody. Great week.
Happy Thanksgiving. Bye. Bye. Thank you, Hattie.
You're welcome. Okay, I'm leaving now. Bye-bye.
Yeah, bye.
Okay. Goodbye, guys.
Bye, everyone.
Okay.
Hi, Randy. Hope you're doing well. You're muted. You're mute. You might want to put your sound up.
There, I've got the mute off. Thank you, Aparna.
You're
I've got-
welcome. How are you doing?
I'm doing fine, but my knee isn't doing so well. But 2 weeks from tomorrow, that's going to be changing.
Oh, yes, yes.
December 2nd.
Yeah, December 2nd. Okay.
Yeah, thanks for thinking of me.
Oh, you're welcome. Thanks for coming today.
Oh, I enjoyed it very much. I attended almost everything you've provided. You've done a great job.
Oh, thank you. Thank you.
Yeah.
I think we might have, I don't know, if Sheila will come on. I asked her, but I think she's tired after her book and everything. And friend might be doing something like piano music with like, you know, talking about some composers and stuff.
Oh, that
That's-
sounds good too.
December, so I'm not sure. So nothing is finalized yet. So
Well, you'll let us know, I'm sure, when it is.
yeah.
I'll look forward to it because I'll be homebound for a while, I'm sure.
I know, that's what I thought it might help you. Yeah.
Yeah. I'll keep track.
Okay. I'll send
Okay.
the email. You'll see it. And I'll check in
Okay.
with you when you go for surgery.
Oh, thank you. You're so sweet. Thank you, Aparna.
You're welcome. Have a good night. Hopefully
Thank
you
you.
have nice dinner to enjoy.
Leftovers. I always like leftovers.
Okay.
Okay,
Have
bye-bye.
a great evening. Bye.
Thank you.